morning. Welcome back. You're still watching Daybreak on this 9th day of July 2024. I want to introduce the panelists here in studio. I have one Honorable David Ocheng, who is the Member of Parliament for Ugenya constituency. Good morning, Mheshimiwa.
Good morning, Sam.
I haven't seen in a number of weeks.
Really?
Yeah. You'll be telling us how life has been since we last met. I have Daisy Abdaji from Crown Trust. Good morning.
Crown Trust, yes. Good morning.
Crown Trust.
Crown Trust, like crown, but with an A, but pronounced crown.
Okay. All right. Karibu sana. And also, it's been quite a while we haven't had you here. What has been going on?
Nothing much. I think I've just been busy with other things.
Okay.
Yeah, you know, times, seasons.
All right, not a problem. We're still expecting the arrival of Arnold Maliba, who is the Strategic Communications Advisor at the governing party, UDA, and Gadono Mushomba, Member of Parliament for Githunguri constituency, who had actually confirmed that she would be here, but late into the night communicated that she would not come for particular reasons. But the show continues. And this morning, we're waking up to the papers on the front page of the Daily Nation, how we fled. On Tuesday, June 25th, just after MPs had passed the controversial finance bill, against intense public pressure, youthful protesters who had been kept off the National Assembly presence for most of the day breached the security and fence of the hallowed August House. For MPs who were in the premises, all hell broke loose as they sought to escape the protesters' wrath. Some of the lawmakers narrate to Nation the events of the fateful day. And the standard main story is about patience runs thin on Ruto reform pledges. And we'll be talking about a bit of these stories, including what the president is expected to do this day on signing into law the IBC amendment bill that will be happening at the KICC. Mheshimiwa, that story is interesting. On front page of the Daily Nation, I don't know if they spoke to you on what exactly happened for you. Do you mind sharing tits and bits of it?
Sam, let me first of all send my condolences and empathies and sympathies to those who have needlessly and unnecessarily lost their lives in the recent spate of protests and demonstrations. I believe we didn't have to lose any life when Kenya is expressing themselves and rights protected in the Constitution. I want to pray with their families. May the Lord comfort them, and ask those who are in charge of this in the future to ensure that we don't have to lose lives where we are just expressing ourselves as Kenyans.
Right.
This was a very interesting day, quite fateful in my opinion. It was the first time I used the tunnel. I didn't even know where it was. So I kept asking the elderlies, where's the tunnel? Because we were among the very last persons to leave the President of Parliament that day. Remember, there was a couple of things happening on the floor, and you know I also sit in the presidium, so I had to stay in until we finished the business of the day in the chamber, and then we walked out and we were sitting at the restaurant, seeing what was going on. There was tear gas all over the place. There was no exit by car out of Parliament. And as you'd imagine, that probably would have been the safest place to be on that day.
Right.
The presence of Parliament. And so when it was breached, and guys came telling us, you guys have to leave. They are here. We thought it was some kind of a joke. And then within a minute, they were actually here. So I left my seat. Then I remember that I'd removed my jacket and my phone and put on the table.
The house?
No, we have now left the chamber and at the restaurant. So we're actually eating. And so personally, I'd moved my jacket and put my phone on the table. And when I left the chair, I'd left both of the phone and the jacket. So I came back for them and followed everyone else. And I asked where the tunnel was and went down to the tunnel, came up onto the new building and onto the streets and walked home.
You actually walked?
I walked. I think I walked up to Nyayo Stadium and took a border from there and then went home. Because my car was marooned in there, and actually when I picked it later, all the windows had been smashed. The back screen and the windows of the car had been smashed.
What was going through your mind at that time?
Frankly speaking, and I say this with conviction, the young guys did the right thing. They brought us back to life. I believe we needed somebody to wake us up, and they did. Yeah. And I want to congratulate them for what they did. It takes those guts, it takes that courage, it takes those kind of things to make people who have been on a very long reverie to realize that we are doing the wrong thing. And to just realize that we are not the only ones in this country who can make decisions. And that our decisions are going to be questioned, and where Kenyans feel helpless about the situation, they will take it upon their hands and upon themselves to do this. I really feel deeply that these young people have changed the way we're going to handle our politics going forward.
You weren't scared, because the story on Deadly Nation, page 6 and 7, talks of members who are recounting on shock and terror. In fact, Didmas Baraza says that he saw death with his eyes.
You know, in my earlier days in life, Sam, and if I was that age, I'm so sure I would have been in the streets. Yeah, because I've been there before. Yeah, and so, I mean, running battles with the police and tear gas, I think I've seen and done that too. It's what needed to be done.
Okay.
Yeah.
Daisy, you haven't spoken about this, at least not on Citizen TV. What did you learn out of it, and what are your reflections on that day? It was actually 2 weeks ago. It may sound like it was such a long time ago. It's just 2 weeks ago.
Good morning, Sam, and thank you for having me this morning. I also want to join Honorable Ochieng in conveying condolences to the families and friends of those that lost their loved ones, and also to call for a speedy investigation. And, you know, we do need to see some action taken against the officers that used live ammunition on unarmed protesters. I think that something definitely needs to be done, and we need to see people taking responsibility for it. I do agree with David Ochieng that the Gen Z have really done the nation proud. I think we've come to a point in our country, you know, we have been seeing incremental changes, incremental changes for years, almost decades, small changes, but not quite getting us to where we need to go. And I think Parliament, particularly under the 2010 dispensation, has been the biggest disappointment for Kenyans, right? Because as representatives, or as those who are supposed to be representatives of the people and the custodians of the public purse, they have been completely deaf to the cries and the pleas of the people. In fact, the problems, the crisis that we find ourselves in, the economic crisis that we find ourselves in, can be laid squarely at the feet of Parliament, right? Because Parliament, according to Article 95 of the Constitution, they are actually the custodians of the public purse. They have the power of the purse. They are the ones who are supposed to check the excesses of the executive. They are supposed to ensure the principles of public finance management in Article 201 are met. And among the principles of the Public Finance Management Act is that the public borrowing shall be equitable, and it shall be spread equitably and reasonably between, well, I'm paraphrasing, between present and future generations, right? Here we find ourselves in a debt crisis, an economic crisis, where over half of the country's revenue is going towards debt repayment. We have Auditor General reports that is a litany of mismanagement, unauthorized spending, possible, theft, And Parliament have done absolutely nothing about it. and they have been tone deaf. The Finance Bill Act now of 2023 was as controversial, you know. But Parliament refused to listen to the cries of the people, just the same way that they did. They've made nonsense of public participation, because there is no sector that didn't talk about going back to the drawing board with the Finance Bill of 2024, right? And so, finally, a generation of Kenyans have gotten up and said, no, we're not going to put up with this. Absolutely not. And if you will not hear us through public participation, then we will make you hear us. And you know, I think it's also important to understand where we are at, you know, because Parliament, Mheshimiwa talks about being awakened. But I also think that, you know, there's this, in the scriptures we read from the wisest man, Solomon, about times and seasons, right? And it is as though Parliament have not discerned the times and the seasons that the nation is in, you know, understanding where the people are at, just moving on. Impunity continuing, you know, not taking us to where we need to be. So I do think that it was necessary.
All right.
It was absolutely necessary. And we must not waste the momentum and what they've brought upon the nation. We must push until that new Kenya is born.
Okay.
We must have a responsive political class.
Okay. Mheshimiwa Cheng, have you been back to the house since that day?
Actually, no. I just sent my driver to pick the car the following day. I've not gone back there since that time, have I? No, I've not gone back.
That's interesting. There was actually a sitting on Wednesday, the day after, to discuss the KDF motion.
Yes, I did want to take part in that. I just didn't feel like I needed to go back there on that day.
Were you aware?
Yes, I was aware.
Someone is asking if it was out of trauma or it was...
For me not going in?
Yeah.
I was actually in town that day. And let me just say I didn't want to take part in the KDF debate.
You didn't believe in it?
I didn't want to take part in it.
That's a very interesting answer.
Yeah, I didn't want to take part in it.
But all the same, we'll get back to the conversations about the developments that have happened. But I'm just wondering, what do you think Parliament now needs to do moving forward? Because as Daisy says, it has been sort of communicating to the people's representatives that you're not representing their voices. What do you think needs to happen, or what you may know that Parliament is already planning to do when you come back in not so long?
You know, basically, how I see it, we can only repair what was broken. But in terms of what Kenyans feel and how we're going to behave going forward, it is upon each individual member of Parliament to take a time and reflect. And because it's not a collective, if you asked me. It is every member of Parliament who swears in and says that they conscientiously are going to carry out the duties of member of Parliament individually. And so I believe that all of us who were there that day, all of us who were not there but saw what happened and have lived through these last 3 weeks would then want to have time with themselves and check whether, you know, we've done the best for the country, we've done the right by ourselves and by our electors. But then the bigger issue for me, Sam, is the way we've structured our governance as a people. You know, in Parliament, there's the side called majority, and there's a side called minority. And that those who have the majority, most of the time, then have their way because you have the numbers. But then these laws, like the Finance Bill, has its own history. The last time I was here, Sam, we discussed the Finance Bill, and I gave you my opinion about it. And like my friend Daisy said, the 2023 Finance Bill, and I came again here to discuss it, was quite controversial, quite acrimonious. And that time I was convinced totally by the president that this was the right thing to do. It was his first term. There are things we wanted to achieve. And I went to TV, I went to radio to defend it. But I told you, and I still believe it, that this year we didn't need a finance bill because I could hear the people speak in my constituency. I'd had meetings out there with the party members across the country, and they kept telling me, David, we cannot keep having taxes being piled upon us. We cannot have another finance bill that is going to raise. And I said it severally, not once, not twice, before the vote was taken, that if I was the one deciding, I would have shelved the finance bill and listened to Kenyans more. Now, I'm using this example to just tell you that I believe that as Parliament, we'll need to change the way we work, especially the way we process public opinion, the way we conduct public participation, the way we conduct our affairs generally. This does not mean to say, Sam, that every time Parliament is seen not to be doing what they're supposed to do, we're going to have to breach Parliament and come with, this for me was a wake-up call. Okay. And we need to ensure that this does not happen again.
All right.
And these young people are not demanding of things that are not possible. I don't think so. They're just asking, can we be heard?
Okay.
And can we be seen? Can we see that you're actually hearing us and taking into account the things we are saying as we make our decisions? And so I believe that, somehow it's been a very good learning moment.
Okay, all right. We'll go back to that conversation, but also to introduce Arnold Maliba, who is the Strategic Communications Advisor at UDA. Good morning.
Good morning, sir.
And we are transitioning. We'll get back to the conversations about the developments after the protests later. But later today, the President is expected at the KICC to sign into law the IEBC Amendment Bill. And this has been a long time coming. Remember, once upon a time, there was a selection committee that had been appointed to recruit new commissioners, but there are contentious issues in there. The opposition protested, and actually the Nelson Makanda team, which had already taken out of office, never really processed the applications, never mind that they received the applications. And that means that there was this amendment bill that now changes the composition of the selection panel, but also many other issues that it has touched on. So at 9 a.m., the President is expected at KICC to be signing it into law to herald the reconstitution of that commission. Daisy, so we are so late in so many things. We haven't done boundaries review, and even if we do them, it will be outside the constitutional timelines. We haven't had any vote registration going on since it was closed. I think it was around March 2022. There are several electoral areas that have not elected their representatives, be they wards or constituencies. At least there's one constituency that lost a member of parliament. So we've suffered, we've lost so much. How significant is this signing into law of the bill?
You know, it ought to have happened ages ago. You know, when I saw the media invite, making a whole ceremony of the signing of this bill into law, it reminded me of a post that somebody made sometime last week saying you do not thank an arsonist for putting out a fire that they started, right? The executive and let me say the political leadership of this country has been extremely irresponsible, right, when it comes to the issue of IBC. Mm-hmm. You've talked about all the things that we have missed, constituencies that have not been able to have representation, and many things that have not been, the commission has not been able to do because we have not had commissioners. The fact that commissioners were sent away without a plan of how to replace them, that in itself was an act of irresponsibility. The other thing is, remember that at the beginning of this year, Justice Thande actually issued orders compelling orders, to the panel that they should actually conclude this exercise because the nation was in a precarious situation. And that is precisely the problem that we have with the current political leadership. Mm-hmm. You see, when I was talking about incremental changes, Kenya moved, right? In 2010, we promulgated a new constitution, and that constitution literally dictates how we are to be governed. Mm-hmm. But we have a political class that refuses to be fettered within the confines of the law and wants to operate, at their own pace, at their own time, holding the entire nation hostage. Remember that the electoral process is not an event, it's literally a process. Right. When the one electoral cycle ends, the next one begins. There's planning, there's everything. And we have seen from past experience that it has been, whether we have commissioners or not, they have been hampered and hamstrung in their role and responsibilities, denied resources at the appropriate time, So it's actually a strategy that has been used by the political class to actually control the electoral process for in their favor. Of course, there were accusations that the whole idea behind getting rid of commissioners was so that a commission could be constituted that was favorable to one particular political side. But that notwithstanding, I like what Justice Tande talked about in her judgment. She said that political priorities cannot supersede the Constitution, constitutional requirements. And so it is part of that culture of impunity that continues to be manifested by our political class. This is what it is. And so when you see this song and dance being made about it, I mean, why sign it in KICC? The bills have been signed in Parliament, in State House all along. So, just this show, it's part of that whole show and dance. And I think, it ought to have happened a long time ago. And, well, I suppose, as they say, better late than never.
All right. And, of course, the invitation, of course, for the media also was welcoming people. I saw the statement by Hussein Mohammed indicating that this is the first product of the NADCO, the National Dialogue Committee, reports and proposed reforms to different laws, and saying that members of the opposition, members from the government are invited, whether they're in parliament or not. Arnold, so why she feels like you're making too much noise about a small issue, which is the assenting, but what it has affected, that delay in securing this has caused a lot of suffering for members of Banissa constituency and Magarini constituency, which the Supreme Court just decided at the end of May, and a few wards that have lost their MCAs.
Well, first of all, I think the two constituencies, Banissa and Magarini, and 4 other wards, I think the first 5, Magarini is fairly recent. The other 5 have actually been waiting for the longest. The people of Banissa, honestly, as a nation, we've been unfair to them because they've been waiting so long, even as we got into political filibustering. And she's not really out of tune. I might actually have a little bit of a difference in opinion in how she looks at circumstance, but then probably we should build up from this particular point that it's been a pattern around here when it comes to IBC, that somehow we actually have to complicate it. This is not the first time we actually are complicating the IBC issue. And when the other team left, we actually had a fairly new framework in place that was actually established just before we went to elections. So no one would expect that the same people that had actually come up with that particular framework would be the people going to the street to oppose it. So that is one thing you really do.
Sorry, oppose what?
When we were going to the elections 2022, there were several changes on how even the Cherera team, how they came in. That was a fairly new framework. So one would be surprised immediately after elections.
But it was changed, yeah?
Yes, it
was changed by the new House in a bill.
That's what he's saying.
Yeah, that's what I'm actually saying.
Initially, 4 members of the selection panel were being appointed or nominated by the Parliamentary Service Commission. There was a High Court decision that said this is giving too much power and skewing the majority to the political class because it was 4 out of 7. And an amendment was brought by Kimani Ichung'wah to split that from Parliamentary Service Commission to share 2 positions. I think it was with the Political Parties Liaison Committee and the Public Service Commission. And the opposition was feeling like, no, this is still in the control of those in government.
My point, Sam, is that that particular process, I think 6 months before the election and slightly after the election, all of us as a country. By the way, when it comes to the House, the issue of the majority and the minority really need to be looked at differently. So what I'm saying is that we sat down as a country, had a framework as we went to elections. As somebody went to court, and then the House, because when you actually bring a bill, whether it's a bill, whatever motion you're bringing to the House, once it's passed, it's actually a property of the House. And the ownership, therefore, is actually for the entire House. So After that, again, we went back. And this, you will remember that the first time you spoke to me about a decade ago, the first time I met you, it was in a similar circumstance that we actually were having another process where one side of the House was actually having a similar problem. So, and elections are not an event the way the political class have really tried to work around it. It's a process. So we are late on so many things, not just on representation, because representation for me is the highest essence or the pillar when it comes to governance. Because that's why you realize that it's the only thing that is shared between the two main arms. I'm sorry if I'm looking at judiciary probably as not really main, but when we talk about the legislature and the executive, all of them, you actually see that the first thing, when, especially for those that are elected, is the essence of representation.
Right.
So we've gone around this issue for a very long time. The government at all times was actually ready to proceed with the guidance of the court and what the House had actually done. But then, of course, you know what followed after that. So as for the little circumstance, you know how we actually have arrived on upon this particular field.
Okay.
That when we invite everybody to come, also we are trying to do away with this feeling that people have to meet in State House. The people of Kenya have actually told us that meet us wherever we are. And KICC is Kenya. When you are sitting to the bill, you don't necessarily have to be in the confines of State House. So,
so that's the explanation.
For me, fairly, because number one, it's a NADCO product.
Okay.
Being NADCO, it was people-led. At least that's what we've given to it.
But it's an act of parliament being sent by the... I mean, there are so many products that come from the House and they're sent by the president at State House.
Some in politics, optics matters.
So what is the optics here?
Even lawyers will tell you that. Sometimes a lawyer can show up with so many files when he's actually just going to...
So...
Yes, or mention.
Just a mention.
Just pick a date.
So many files. So
that's what we do.
So what is the optics here?
The optics is that... we are going out there. We are talking to people. We are changing the way people really... People have spoken to us and we've heard. So it's a gesture.
You know, I don't want to analyze what you're saying because you might actually be beating your own point. But never mind. Honorable Chair, so protracted a process this has been. And one can only imagine looking at now the political parties liaison committee, instead of proposing 2 names, will be proposing 3. The Parliamentary Service Commission will retain the 2, only that it will be split between the majority and minority. Then the only addition is ISPAC to contribute a member to have a selection panel of 9. And one wonders, so does this cure all the suspicions that the country has had? But the moment Kimani Ichung'wah was presenting an amendment bill, I think it was in September or October 2022, we have wasted more than 1.5 years. Was it worth it, knowing what it has cost? Because even the delimitation of boundaries should have ended by March.
Too much ado about nothing. I remember when we were doing this bill at 3rd reading and I voted no, and everyone turned to look at me. Why was I voting no? Because I didn't believe in it too. It's too much heat, no fire. It basically gets us back to what this country needs to have fixed. The deficit of trust in public institutions and how we govern ourselves and how we conduct our public affairs. You know, every leader at one point in time says, we want to build strong institutions. We should allow institutions to work. This is an institution that's never been allowed to work. The ABC has never been allowed the independence required to allow it to work. And everyone at some point in time thinks that when you are appointing commissioners, there's a way in which I can get commissioners that are friendly to me and all that. Why do you need friendly commissioners? I mean, why do we always have to think that the IBC will have people in there who will do someone's bidding or the other person's bidding? I believe that we didn't need 9 people in the panel to appoint commissioners who can serve us. If we got 3, because what is the panel supposed to do? To interview and propose to Parliament, and then the President appoints. It is a very simple job that didn't have to go through all these things. But as usual, and in my 3 terms in Parliament now, I've seen this happen to IBC every time before elections. And this time around, just after elections, actually the bill you spoke about was actually among the very first bills we passed in this new Parliament, so that we can have an IBC that everyone thought is going to be in their own likeness and image, as it were. But I believe that we've lost so much time, and I hope that when the President signs the bill today, and the bill provides that within 14 days there must be a panel. But you know, I just don't understand how our political processes then make us circumvent the laws. The Makanda Committee had the backing of the law all through. Nothing stopped them from doing anything. But some people kept speaking to them in the sidelines. Oh, mungoje kidogo, hold on. If you go on, some people will go to the streets. If you go on, you're going to mess up an already good situation.
Please hold that thought. We'll get back to it so that we can conclude on the question of IBC and the crisis ahead. Already, the Secretariat CEO, Hussein Marjan, has petitioned the Supreme Court for an advisory opinion on what should happen, knowing that there are several deadlines that are lost. Wants advice from the Supreme Court on whether the Commission as it is now can go ahead and conclude that process. Stay tuned. You're back in a moment.